And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. If you hadn't noticed, 29 is still gallivanting around, and so we're here in the original. And see, I get so caught up on these terms, but we're in the second Cowboy State Politics studio, and we'll be back in our main studio tomorrow. Hopefully, God willing, and perhaps if 29 isn't off messing around somewhere. Though I'm told there are some headlines from the Joint Appropriations Committee that, wouldn't you guess, haven't shown up in the cow pie. So we'll bring those to you tomorrow. And from what 29 tells me, it was an interesting meeting, or it was lined up to be an interesting meeting anyway. But we'll get some updates from him on that tomorrow. Today on the program, and I think I want to start. I don't know if you've listened to the podcast yet or not, but you should. That thing was a rockin' indictment of Eric Barlow. The trouble with having a decade-plus legislative career is everything that you've done is out there in public for everyone to see. Every vote that you made, vote that you didn't make, what you did as Speaker of the House. And I'm telling you, my friends, as far as Eric Barlow is concerned, there's a ton. I mean, there are so many different little sinister, and I really do think that sinister is the right word, because if you're a guy who votes with the Democrats 81.88% of the time over the last decade, and then you call yourself a conservative, not only are you lying to yourself and all of your constituents, you're just making up a version of reality that didn't happen. That's not true. Let me just give you a rundown here. Over the past decade, and I don't have stats from 2025 yet, but according to Evidence-Based Wyoming, and I've told you over and over, but if you're new to the program, I'll just explain this again. So Evidence-Based Wyoming is a site that all they do is track how often a legislator votes with the Republicans versus how often they vote with the Democrats. That's all they do. And with that small amount of, and it's not a small amount of data, but with that limited in scope amount of data, that's a better way to put it, you can derive a lot. And as far as Eric Barlow is concerned, starting in 2024, let me just give you, and we'll just walk back a few years. 2024, he voted 81.73% of the time with the Democrats. 2023 was pretty close, 81.43. 2022, he had really picked up the pace, 84.88% of the time with the Democrats. And then in 2021, he got dramatically more conservative. I don't know, maybe he got the conservative bug, and he only voted with the Democrats 73% of the time. Now, from there back to all the way to 2015, and Eric Barlow was in the House in 2013, I believe. But all the way back, I mean, it's 86% of the time, 84, 82, 78, 83. I mean, he is a Democrat. I mean, there is no question about it. I mean, if you're 85% of something, it kind of means that you're that thing. And if you average all those together, over the last decade, Eric Barlow voted with the Democrats 81.88% of the time. Now, his record on other things, guns and pro-life issues, it's not much better. In fact, he has a very, and I guess maybe the best way to put this is Eric Barlow has a complicated relationship with the truth. When he is in power, he is, and by power I mean a chairman or a speaker of the House, or God help us all if he ever becomes governor. But when he's in a position of power, he is one of the most anti-pro-life people in the state of Wyoming. So here in a little bit, I want to get into some of the news of the day, but then I'm going to play for you a portion of the podcast, and then you can go listen to the rest of it, because the whole thing is a damning indictment of Eric Barlow. And judging from the response online, my friends, I always know when I've hit the nail on the head. There's two telltale signs that I have really knocked the ball out of the park. The first one is nobody says anything because they're too scared to. It's an incredible episode. A lot of research went into it, and if it's just crickets. The media, they're always crickets. I could break the biggest story in the world, and the Wyoming lamestream media would completely ignore it. So if it's crickets, that means I've hit it out of the park. Or if there's a tsunami of comments, and that's the one that happened yesterday. So anyway, I'll take a look at the numbers when we get halfway through the program, and I'll tell you exactly how well that episode was received. But I'm telling you, my friends, there were thousands of people that looked at that thing yesterday. So anyway, here in a little bit, I'll play an excerpt of that. But I want to do some of the news first. And the first thing on the agenda is from the New York Post. And we all knew that when the Trump administration came in, everybody who had, not everybody, but a lot of the people who had security clearances, they were going to have them for very long, because they used their security clearance for nefarious purposes. And it's not just people who are in office or have a job in the government or are in the military right now that have a security clearance. There are folks that have they haven't been in government for a really long time that still have a security clearance. So, if you were, a full bird colonel or a general, or you were high up in the CIA or the FBI, typically security clearances are continued even after you're not in government anymore. And there were a number of people from the Obama and Biden administration that really used their security clearance for some pretty terrible purposes. Well, from the New York Post, Tulsi Gabbard has stripped 37 security clearances over Obama-ordered intel report that launched Russiagate. Now, remember, we're not calling it Russiagate anymore. It's Obamagate. Of course, the guy that said we didn't have a single scandal in our administration. He lied about everything else while he was president. So why not that too? And I quote from the New York Post. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard announced security clearances had been pulled from 37 current and former officials who, quote, abused public trust by politicizing and manipulating information, including several who were involved in a controversial President Barack Obama-ordered assessment of Russian influence in the 2016 election. The ODNI, so Office of Director of National Intelligence memo, announced that more than 36 intel professionals, including a former top aide to Obama, James Clapper, had either politicized or weaponized intelligence, failed to safeguard classified information, or didn't follow tradecraft standards. Quote, the president has directed that, effective immediately, the security clearances of the following 37 individuals are revoked. The August 18th memo stated, according to copy obtained by the Post, their access to classified systems, facilities, materials, and information is to be terminated forthwith. Any contacts or employment with the U.S. government by these 37 individuals is hereby terminated. Any credentials held by those individuals must be surrendered to the appropriate security officers. The 37 include ex-Principal Deputy DNI Stephanie O'Sullivan, Vin Nugent, both of whom worked under Clapper while his office was producing the now discredited 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment, or ICA, on Russia's preference for then-candidate Donald Trump in the 2016 contest with Hillary Clinton. And just to give you a little refresher on that one, all of this information that has come out from Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel really has indicated that Russia didn't prefer Donald Trump, that they in no way wanted him to be president. In fact, they were in favor of Hillary Clinton because they had the goods on her. Hillary and Bill Clinton had been doing like really terrible stuff, ever since he was out of the White House. The Clinton Initiative, remember that? The money laundering organization where they claimed that they were going to, rebuild Haiti, and hardly any of the money that they raised went to Haiti. Well, the Russians had a lot of dirt on Hillary Clinton. And so, of course, they want her to be president. Now, Nugent had been serving in the Trump administration as the National Security Agency's first chief responsible for artificial intelligence. His involvement with the ICA report was first revealed by Real Clear Investigations earlier this month. Remember, I told you all about those. Several others affected by Tuesday's announcement were involved in that ICA report, while some also signed on to the September 2019 statement in support of House Democrats' first impeachment inquiry into Trump. So, all of these individuals were intimately involved in not only Obamagate, but everything that happened afterwards, the impeachments and how that investigation morphed each time something new would come out. I mean, they impeached him the first time, then it was January 6th, and that investigation just kept going. And all of the indictments into President Trump, don't think for a second that James Clapper and John Brennan and all of these 37 people were not involved in all of it. Of course they were. They were feeding information to prosecutors. I mean, there was this, you remember the deputy prosecutor from Georgia who made several trips, like 9 trips to the White House? Why does a deputy county prosecutor need to go to the White House? Well, it was to get dirt on Trump. Of course it was. But he made a lot of visits with the Biden administration. And so a lot of that was facilitated by these 37 people. Quote, being entrusted with security clearance is a privilege, not a right, Gabbard said in a statement. Those in the intelligence community who betray their oath to the Constitution and put their own interests ahead of the interests of the American people have broken the sacred trust they promised to uphold. Quote, our intelligence community must be committed to upholding the values and principles enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, the spy chief added, and, quote, and maintain a laser-like focus on our mission to ensure the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Gabbard last month began testifying, declassifying records about the crafting of the 2017 ICA under Obama, revealing what she has called, quote, a treasonous conspiracy by senior administration officials to, quote, to subvert President Trump's 2016 victory. So, again, these 37 people were involved from the beginning all the way till the end of Obamagate. And up until this point, they still had security clearances. And, it just tells you the depth of and the corruption that was the Obama and Biden presidencies, that all these people worked together. Remember the letter signed by 50-some intelligence officials saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Remember that one? Yep. Same type of folks. James Clapper, John Brennan, they were all involved in that. And we later learned that the Hunter Biden laptop was absolutely genuine. That there was no question about it. And I think that, anybody who looked at a lot of the stuff that came off that laptop, you just can't make that stuff up. And even if you did, nobody would believe it. So absolutely, it was all genuine. And thankfully, Tulsi Gabbard has, done away with that, with those security clearances. So that's a good thing. And I expect that there's going to be more of this type of thing happening. The deep state, and I don't think a lot of people really understand the depth of the what we call the deep state. Career bureaucrats that have been in positions of authority, unchecked, unaccountable to voters, just completely under the radar employees, and they've been there for decades. And it's those folks that you got to worry about. In fact, there was an interview we did with Representative Hageman. Oh man, I think it was last month, month before that, where she talked about what we really need is term limits for quote unquote civil service employees. I mean, that's kind of a euphemism because a lot of these folks in the deep state, service is the last thing on their agenda. So that's really where we need to take an axe to a lot of these people. And I don't know how you do it. Maybe you say that okay, you can work for the federal government for 10 years. After that, you're done. Or maybe it's 6 or 8 years or two presidential terms or whatever. But there needs to be term limits on those people. Because the longer you're in government, the more connections you make, the easier it is to manipulate those people that are in power. And I think the biggest problem with that is bureaucrats. And one of the good Wyoming examples is the Legislative Service Office. Matt Obricht is one of the most liberal people down in Cheyenne, definitely in the Capitol building. He's worked with the Redcoats for as long as he's been there. And so a lot of the stuff that the Legislative Service Office did, I guess. Now, it still does. If you're a conservative, well, it's much harder to deal with them than if you're one of the liberals. I've talked to several conservatives that say, you'll submit a bill and it'll come back with so many comments on it. They've rewritten it. It's not what you intended at all. And there's 27 reasons why it's unconstitutional. But if you're a liberal, well, that your bill just goes on through. There have been several conservatives I've talked to that said they've gone back and forth with the Legislative Service Office. And finally, they get to a point where they just say, write the bill the way I submitted it. I don't need any changes. I want it the way that I wrote it. And Agent 29 has told me that. Representative Jennings has told me that. Some of the senators. So, this is nothing new. But it's those career bureaucrats, just like those folks some of the folks in the Legislative Service Office, that they're there for so long, and they get their tentacles into just about everything. So, that's one place where I think, generally, I'm not in favor of term limits at all, specifically because they're not constitutional. They're not in the Constitution. There's nowhere in there that says, except the president. There's that one amendment about the president can only serve 2 terms. But other than that, the founders didn't intend that because we have elections. Elections in and of themselves are term limits. And so who's to say that a district in California shouldn't be able to elect Nancy Pelosi over and over and over if they want to? Why should some arbitrary time limit be put on it? And here's the other thing too. The representation is the most important thing. Like one of the Article 5 convention, here's a good example. One of the only things that it can't do is eliminate representation in the Senate. State representation in the Senate. So, there really aren't any term limits specifically, except, of course, elections, and that's the way that it ought to be. And there's a number of reasons for that. I got way off on the rabbit trail on that one. But I saw a piece in the Post-Millennial, and the news media has been talking about this for quite a while. But I just wanted to give you a list of all of the wars and conflicts that President Trump has resolved thus far. And there's a good piece in the Post-Millennial this morning that does exactly that. So let me just run through them real quick. Armenia and Azerbaijan, that was this month. Cambodia and Thailand, that was last month. The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, that was in June. Ethiopia and Egypt, that was also in June. Let's see, there we go, page 2. India and Pakistan, that one was in May. Serbia and Kosovo, that was in 2020. And the one that is not on the list is the Abraham Accords. So that was with Israel and several nations in the Middle East. Ton. There's no reason why Donald Trump doesn't have a Nobel Peace Prize. So a couple of the top headlines, and I've got more in the stack of stuff. I just wanted to start out with that, just kind of get us off on the right foot. But I really don't want to go too much farther before I play for you an excerpt from yesterday's podcast. And one of the things I did is Back in January, I did an episode called The Bills in Barlow's Drawer, or the pro-life bills in Barlow's drawer, because Eric Barlow's record when it comes to pro-life issues is kind of complicated. But let me just see if I can boil it down for you a little bit. When he is not in a position of authority, that is chairman or speaker of the House or whatever other office, he tends to vote pretty well on pro-life issues. That's because he doesn't want there to be a record that he isn't pro-life. And so he tends to have a pretty good voting record. But when he is the chairman or when he was the Speaker of the House, he stuffed almost every single pro-life bill that he could think of into his drawer, or he worked to kill it. And there are lots of examples. So in that January episode, I went through a lot of those. So yesterday, I included that excerpt just because it's a really clear explanation of how Eric Barlow does or did business when he was a chairman or speaker of the House. Because, I mean, he's trying to tell people that, he is a conservative. He's the conservatives' conservative. He's got conservative values, except, of course, just like all the redcoats, his voting record doesn't show that. And, I led with that this morning saying, well, he votes with the Democrats almost 82% of the time over the last decade. So that's kind of a big one. So I'm going to play this excerpt for you, and then I've got one more little piece to talk to you about. But here is an excerpt from yesterday's podcast, The Bills in Barlow's Drawer. Here you go. And this is where you really have to pay attention to Eric Barlow's record. He's been in the Wyoming legislature since 2013, and since that time, there have been a ton of pro-life bills that have gone through either the House or the Senate. And to get an understanding of what Eric Barlow does with pro-life legislation, you have to go all the way back to 2013. And the first pro-life bill that he actually had an opportunity to vote for was House Bill 97. This was the original heartbeat bill. It would have outlawed abortion after a fetal heartbeat was detected. Eric Barlow voted against it. Curiously, in 2014, there wasn't any pro-life legislation for Eric to have acted upon. But in 2015, on House Bill 156, that would have required information on ultrasounds be given to a patient. Eric Barlow, again, voted no on it in committee. In 2016, and perhaps this is where Eric Barlow got the idea that he could put pro-life legislation in his drawer, then the notorious Speaker of the House, Kermit Brown, put every single pro-life bill in his drawer, and they didn't see the light of day. That's a lesson that Eric Barlow wouldn't forget, and he'd file it away for his time when he was actually in leadership. After 2016, Barlow's actual voting record, when he actually had to be on record and vote for or against a pro-life piece of legislation, his voting record gets a little bit better. But don't forget, just a couple of years prior to that, he voted to allow abortions even after there was a heartbeat. In 2017, Eric Barlow voted for House Bill 116. That would have prohibited the sale of fetal tissue. That same year, House Bill 132, the reporting of abortions, came before his committee, House Health and Labor. What did Eric Barlow do? And tell me if this is familiar. He put it in his drawer, and that bill died right there in committee. That same year, Barlow voted for House Bill 182, which is the bill that would have mandated information be given to a patient on ultrasounds before an abortion. It's also interesting that this is the same bill that he voted against all the way back in 2015. In 2018, there was a pro-life bill that he voted for, Senate File 21. And then 2019, there was House Bill 103, that was more reporting of abortions. That same year, he voted for House Bill 140, which would have required a 48-hour waiting period before receiving an abortion. The only other piece of pro-life legislation in 2019 was House Bill 302, that would have created a penalty for failing to provide informed consent to a patient. That one was put in the drawer by Steve Harshman, who was then the Speaker of the House. In 2020, there was one piece of pro-life legislation. That was House Bill 197. It was, again, the 48-hour waiting period. And Barlow voted for that one, too. Okay, so hold on just a second. One of the reasons why I went through his voting record so carefully is to show you that, yeah, he does vote for some pro-life legislation when he's not in power. And the reason for that is he doesn't want his voting record to reveal that he is against any sort of pro-life legislation. But remember, where this excerpt started, all the way back in 2015, the very first chance that Eric Barlow had to vote against a pro-life bill, he voted against the heartbeat bill. Now, let's just take a second and think about the implications of that. That bill said that after a fetal heartbeat is detected, no abortions in the state. And I think that just about everybody can agree that, man, if something's got a heartbeat, it is alive. And I would argue that, human life begins at conception, not at the heartbeat. But that was the very first one that he voted against. Now, how could you possibly be pro-life? And that's the very first pro-life piece of legislation that you vote on. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. And as you'll hear in just a second, when he's in power, when he's the chairman, when he is the Speaker of the House, it looks a lot worse for him. But it takes a lot of research to find all this stuff out. I mean, it took me the better part of a day to go through his voting record and find all of these bills. And so that's what Eric Barlow, the gubernatorial candidate, is counting on, that you're not going to go back and look through his voting record with a fine-tooth comb and find out how he votes on pro-life legislation or how he acts around it. And if you remember, at the beginning of this past legislative session, Senator Larry Hicks objected to Barlow being the chairman of Health and Labor. The Health and Labor Committee, that's where all the pro-life bills go. Well, the reason why he objected is every time Eric Barlow is the chairman, he starts stuffing pro-life legislation in the drawer. And I mean, there's lots of evidence to support that. So let's go ahead and continue. There's a little bit more than 2 minutes left. So here you go. So again, his voting record, and as the cow pie correctly points out, it looks as though Senator Eric Barlow is largely pro-life, which, again, I don't know how you could be largely pro-life, but anyway, it is what he did as chairman and as Speaker of the House that ought to concern everyone in Wyoming. This is the main reason that Senator Hicks gave for his objection to Barlow's appointment as chairman of Health and Labor. When Eric Barlow took over the Speaker's gavel, he proceeded to stuff every piece of pro-life legislation that he could into his drawer to make sure that it never had a chance for a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. In 2021, House Bill 70, which was another informed consent bill, he put it in his drawer. Now, in 2021, there was House Bill 161, which outlawed discriminatory abortions. He actually voted in favor of that one. The abortifacients bill from that year, he put it in his drawer. There was the trigger bill from 2022 that would have outlawed abortion in the event that the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. He voted against that bill being introduced on the floor of the House. When they lost that vote, and it did come to the floor, Eric Barlow did vote in favor of it on third reading. That same year, House Bill 149, which was the same discriminatory abortions bill, Eric Barlow put it in his drawer. In 2022, there was Senate File 83, another abortifacients bill, which he also put in his drawer, and it didn't hit the floor for a vote either. In 2023 and 2024, Eric Barlow had moved to the Wyoming Senate. There were 3 abortion bills that he could have voted on, and as he did point out on the floor of the Senate yesterday, he voted in favor of House Bill 152, the Life is a Human Right Act, as well as Senate File 109, which was Tim Salazar's abortifacients bill, and in 2024, House Bill 148, which was a regulation of abortions bill. That's the one that the governor vetoed. Eric Barlow also voted in favor of that. So it's not really Eric Barlow's voting record that is of concern here. It's what he does when he's in a position of power to affect the pro-life agenda. Every time that Eric Barlow has been the chairman, or if he's been the Speaker of the House, he's made a concerted effort to kill pro-life legislation. Just imagine what he would do as governor of Wyoming, because we have a pretty clear record, over a decade of what he's done when he's been in a position of power. So, I mean, we can only assume, and I think rightly so, that if he were to become governor, all of these pro-life bills would end up being vetoed, and I mean, I really think that it would be a really bad scenario. But just think about that, right? So you actually vote for pro-life, and what you're hearing in the background is my coffee pot going. I know it sounds a little bit weird on the program, but just imagine that, right? So in your mind, you vote for pro-life bills, but when you're in charge, those pro-life bills, they go in the drawer. We're not going to be having any of that. You make a concerted effort to make sure that the pro-life agenda is not advanced, even though when you're going to be on record, when there's going to be a paper trail of what you've done, well, then, you've got to be pro-life. Because, as he said in his campaign announcement, and I didn't prep that one, you'll have to go back to the podcast and listen to that he's going to defend the rights of the unborn. Just like you did when you were Speaker of the House, just like you did when you were Chairman of Health and Labor, just like you've done your entire legislative career. Is that what the kids are calling it these days? Well, my friends, there are, and in his record on guns, I mean, he is one of the few people in the Wyoming legislature in recent memory that's written gun control into Wyoming law. That was his so-called restoration of rights bill. It's a complicated thing, but in the podcast, I go through it and explain exactly how that went down and why that should concern you if you value your firearms at all. Eric Barlow, man, the guy's a liberal. I've seen posts on social media that say, oh, he's Gordon 2.0. No, I think he's much worse than Mark Gordon. And after being in the legislature for over a decade, he knows the ins and outs. He knows how to manipulate the government, our state government. And I mean, he's, in my mind, he's a pretty dangerous person to put in power. So anyway, go listen to the podcast. There's a lot more where that came from. And I mean, like I say, it's the thing's blowing up. So yeah, I know I hit the nail on the head. Well, my friends, the stats are in. Crime in D.C. is down. I wonder why. It couldn't be that maybe there's people actually arresting criminals. I don't know. It could be. But D.C. crime is already dramatically lower after the Trump crackdown. And I quote from the Daily Wire, crime has already dramatically dropped in our nation's capital since President Donald Trump moved to make D.C. safe again for all residents and visitors. According to the D.C. Police Union, carjackings are down a stunning 83%. Robberies are down 46%, and violent crime is down 22%. It's amazing what happens when you actually start arresting criminals. Other people don't commit crimes because deterrence works. It always works. If there's a high likelihood that you're going to be thrown in the slammer for whatever it is that you're doing, a lot of people aren't going to do that because it's probably not a lot of fun being in an 8x10. And, and orange is probably not everybody's color. And so, you should just avoid that whole thing altogether. But the stats were based on crime since Trump's announcement that he was going to crack down on D.C. crime compared to the previous 7 days. So these stats are only a week old. And I mean, it's one thing to say that year over year, crime is down 46%. I mean, 365 days, I mean, there's a lot of time. But what you're talking about here is in the span of a week, crime has dramatically dropped in Washington, D.C. And the D.C. Police Union, or let's see here. The stats are, I read that. The D.C. Police Union, which reps thousands of officers, detectives, and sergeants from the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, also noted that assault with a deadly weapon is down 6%. Car thefts have dropped 21%. Property crime is down 6% overall, and overall crime is down 8% across the board. But the details on Trump's D.C. cleanup don't stop there. In total, since earlier this month, there have been 450 arrests, including 3 known gang members and 68 firearms seized. On Monday evening alone, authorities at the Capitol made 52 arrests, including an MS-13 gang member illegally in the country. Some of the other arrests involved murder, attempted murder, felony assault, and firearms charges. A staggering 48 homeless encampments have also been peacefully removed, with voluntary relocations. On Tuesday afternoon, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt highlighted Trump's successes in working to make D.C. safe again. She specifically noted that a significant number of the arrests have been concentrated in high-crime areas. Now, I've got a piece of video from what Press Secretary Leavitt said. Let me just play that for you real quick. Hold on just a second. Yeah, this is why we need Agent 29, so you don't have to wait while I'm queuing up a video. But here's Caroline Leavitt on D.C. crime. Here we go.
President Trump's efforts to make D.C. safe again are working. There have been a total of 465 arrests since the start of this operation on Thursday, August 7th. Last night, there were a total of 52 arrests, including the arrest of an illegal alien MS-13 gang member with convictions for DWI and drug possession. Thanks to President Trump's leadership and the outstanding work of both federal and local law enforcement, dangerous gang members like the one picked up last night will not be allowed on the streets of our nation's capital. Other arrests last night included assault with a deadly weapon for stabbing, parole violation for robbery, murder, outstanding warrant for attempted murder, assault on federal law enforcement officer, and felony assault. 4 more homeless encampments were also removed during yesterday's reporting period. To date, a total of 48 homeless encampments have been cleared in Washington, D.C. by multi-agency teams. MPD patrol units are actively working with city officials to locate and clear additional encampments and remove homeless residents off of Washington's streets. And despite fake narratives from the media, again, a significant number of the arrests have been in high crime areas of D.C. In fact, nearly half of all of the non-illegal alien-related arrests have occurred in wards 7 and 8, the 2 wards that have the highest number of violent crime, as well as homicides and assaults with dangerous weapons last year. So while Democrats continue to coddle violent criminals, President Trump and this administration are focused on putting them behind bars and unapologetically standing up for the safety of law-abiding American citizens. And the White House will continue to provide all of you with the results of this operation in the days ahead.
I mean, it's not hard to do the math on these. When you start arresting people, crime goes down. And this is exactly what the left doesn't want. And, you know, a lot of people kind of scratch their heads about the Biden administration and their approach to crime, and that is not prosecuting anything. That, well, you know, we need more social workers. Now, obviously, crime is partially a social problem. That is, you know, folks have a bad childhood. They don't have a dad around. And, you know, these folks have not gone to school. They don't have anything else. And so, yeah, of course they're going to commit crime. That part of it is social. But we can't stop. When you stop prosecuting crime, it only serves to, you know, embolden criminals. And it's no different. I mean, if you don't discipline a child, they're going to keep doing whatever it is that they're doing. There's no reason why they should stop. And so if you have a crime scene and a bunch of social workers show up, there's no incentive for anybody not to commit a crime. Oh, so I got to talk to a social worker. Whoopity-doo. And then their policy of no cash bail, where people would get popped, they'd go get booked, and they're out on the street in 10 minutes. Why would you do that to somebody that's committing a violent crime? It's only because you want the violent crime to continue. And the thinking behind it, and I don't even know if we could classify it as thinking, but it really is the Francis Fox Piven strategy, and that is overwhelm the system, and so that there's no other way to take care of it than to clamp down. And you know, when Francis Fox Piven was, you know, it's Cloward and Piven and Francis Fox Piven. So Piven is the Francis Fox is the Piven part. So Cloward and Piven, they had this political theory that if you wanted to create socialism, what you needed to do was overwhelm the healthcare system. And their writings almost exclusively dealt with healthcare. And their idea was put so many people on the rolls that the system itself collapses. And when that happens, the base will rise up. That, you know, they've been given free healthcare for so long. And, you know, I'm a diabetic. I fully understand this. You know, I can't live a day without insulin. And so, you know, when people get desperate, well, then they're going to act out. So the idea is overwhelm the system, the base will rise up, and then the federal government will have no alternative but to clamp down on what's going on. It's the very same strategy that the brown shirts used in the 1930s Germany. So the brown shirts were Hitler's kind of public menace. They created chaos. And, you know, eventually at some point when the chaos gets to such a level that people can't stand it, they will cry out and say, please, God, somebody stop all of this. And then the top comes down and you can take full control. Well, while Cloward and Piven's strategy related almost exclusively to healthcare, it's the same applies to just about every other governmental system. If you can overwhelm it, which is what, you know, releasing violent criminals without any sort of bail, not prosecuting crime, allowing it to run rampant, well, that's an attempt to overwhelm the system. And when your local police force can't handle it, what do they have to do? Well, you have to get help from the state or the federal government. And then, boom, the top comes down and you have full control. It really is a strategy to create chaos. And that's what Biden and Obama were doing. And I think with Joe Biden, it was probably more than during the Obama administration. You know, it's like Obama set the stage for everything, and the radicals that were in charge of the Biden administration, they're the ones that put it into practice full bore. And so that's what you were seeing with crime. Well, Trump comes along, and we're cracking down on crime. And so, we kind of put a halt to that. But, I mean, there are other ways that, malactors in government try to take away your rights. And let's be clear about this. Everything that the Democrats are doing, the radical Democrats in D.C., the Democrats in Wyoming, and the redcoats in Wyoming. And again, let me explain what I mean by redcoat. And being a historian, I compared this to the Revolutionary War, when the British had spies running around everywhere. Nobody really knew who was a spy and who was a patriot. And it wasn't until these spies went to a house that they probably had seized from a colonist that they took off their patriot clothes and revealed themselves for who they really are, redcoats. That is exactly what Democrats claiming to be Republicans are doing. Instead of being a Democrat, they change their voter registration to a Republican. They hide out in the Republican Party, and they vote exactly the same way they would if they were an elected Democrat. They're redcoats. And so that's exactly their strategy here. Now, there's a really good example of what happens when you have unchecked power. Now, you may have seen this. There's a video going around of Senator Troy McEwen at a Gillette City Council meeting. And evidently, and I don't really have all the specifics except this video, but apparently the city of Gillette, the city council, has signed a non-disclosure agreement with at least one nuclear company to bring their nuclear company to Gillette. And as you might imagine, the people who live in Gillette are none too happy about this. But let me just go ahead and play this video from Senator Troy McEwen for you. And this is interesting because Senator McEwen is pretty close to Dennis Beitman, Bo Beitman, Senate president, who is totally in favor of all this nuclear stuff. But listen close to what Senator McEwen says. Here you go.
Senator.
Thank you. State Senator Troy McEwen. And I usually don't announce myself that way. But I'm really disgruntled that y'all think you can sign a non-disclosure agreement, violate State Public Records Act. You're doing this all in a back room. And I'm referring to the nuclear companies you want to bring in and the stuff you want to do with that in secret. Why is there a secret on the companies? Why can't we know what the companies are? You're not a corporate headquarters. You don't run a business. You think you do, evidently, where you can do whatever you want behind closed doors and not tell anybody. 63% of my constituents on the latest poll don't support this, but it's all a secret.
Okay, hold it right there. That part was really important. Did you hear what he said? 62% or 61% of his constituents don't support this nuclear deal. Now, the reason why I say that's important is Senator McEwen is really close to Senator Bo Beitman. McEwen's in leadership. He was one of the chairmen. I don't know if he still is or not. But very close to Bo Beitman, and we know that Dennis Beitman, is totally in favor of all of this nuclear stuff. Remember the piece of audio that I have that says that we in Wyoming want nuclear waste, which, of course, I mean, you just heard Senator McEwen say, hey, he polled his constituents, and they don't want this. So that's really important. And I have heard the same story across the state. There are a lot of elected representatives and senators that are polling their districts to find out what their constituents really want. And overwhelmingly, Wyoming citizens are against this. Not against nuclear energy, against the waste being stored here. And I mean, that is the little hitch in the giddy up. Now, I've seen a couple people, elected officials, local elected officials online. You just don't want Wyoming to prosper. Yeah, you don't want this opportunity for Wyoming. No, that's not true. You're not thinking through it. You're not thinking clearly because you went to a dog and pony show in Idaho and they convinced you that all of this is safe. Wyoming citizens are for energy. I'm all in favor of nuclear energy. I am not, however, in favor of nuclear waste, and that is the problem. If we could find some way to deal with the waste that wasn't potentially going to hurt the state of Wyoming, yeah, I'd be all in favor of. But right now, I don't want a nuclear waste dump here, and I don't buy the argument that their method is good for 40. It's good for 40 years. I mean, all the research I've done on all these storage casks, that's what I find out. Well, it's good for 40 years. Great. Well, what do you do after 40 years? What do you do after I'm dead and gone? Do our grandchildren and our children have to deal with this? I've seen a lot of people come, well, they're earthquake proof. How do you know? Have they been tested through an earthquake? I mean, do you know that for a fact? And the answer to that is no, they don't. It's a lot of conjecture. And the truth is that Wyoming citizens don't want this. Overwhelmingly, there's a lot of unofficial polls that are online. You can go look at them. Overwhelmingly, Wyoming citizens don't want to be a nuclear waste dump. So, I mean, this is a perfect example of why we have to be on guard against these elected officials. And I mean, Troy McEwen's an elected senator, and he doesn't know what the city of Gillette is doing. So let's continue with what he said.
We're going to do what we're going to do. We're going to violate State Public Records Act because we're that important here. It's ridiculous. So my question is, why did we sign a non-disclosure act? You want to talk about no transparency? You want to talk about everybody in this room wants to know what's going on, but they can't because of a business deal? And it literally is a business deal. My question is, when did you guys become a corporation? When did what you think, as one of you said, and I won't point out who it was, none of us are smart enough to know what we want? And I'm sure the individual who said it knows who I'm talking to. It just amazes me. Nobody wants this nuclear stuff right now. And yes, we did pass state legislation to allow temporary storage in camera. But there's no national repository, none. And they want to bring all the garbage from around the country into this state, and we're going to collect money off that? And you're all right. I'll be long gone before the damages happen. Probably y'all will be too. But my grandkids and my great-grandkids will be here to drink polluted water, screwed up mess for the environment. But hey, we made some money off of it right now. And I'm telling you, 63% of my constituents, which are almost 63% of many of your constituents, don't want this. But we keep pushing the thing down the road. It's a great idea. And then when people ask questions, we hide behind a non-disclosure agreement? And all of you said you're going to be transparent? It alarms me. It's kind of like the potholes at Don's supermarket. The city wants to fine me $750 a day for not fixing potholes that are on a road I don't own. And they don't fix their own potholes. But we're going to put millions of dollars into making City Hall a better place. And then we're going to spend and collect money and not tell anybody why or who or what's going on. And I'd speak more to it, but my point is, I can't believe that an elected official would ever sign a non-disclosure agreement. Because all he's telling everybody and anybody who signed it is that the business is more important than the people, and the people shouldn't know what's going on. And I apologize for sounding so harsh tonight, but it just drives me up the wall that you guys are making decisions that you're not sharing with your constituents. Congratulations and welcome. God bless socialism. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Senator.
There you have it, my friends. Even a state senator is irritated about all of this nuclear stuff. And perhaps the thing that, and definitely the thing that he's more ticked off about, is that they signed some stupid non-disclosure agreement, which, by the way, they probably can't legally do. But they did it anyway. And how an elected official could sign an agreement not to disclose what he's doing when he's elected by the people and acts on their behalf. So basically, what those elected officials in Gillette did is they signed an agreement on behalf of all of their constituents, saying that the constituents don't need to know. I mean, it's like signing a non-disclosure agreement that you won't tell yourself what's going on. It's absolutely stupid, and it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. Senator McEwen, thank you very much for going to the city council and letting them have it. They absolutely deserve all of it, my friends. But this is how some of these people in government operate. That you don't need to know. You're too stupid to know. So you just mind your own business. Don't pay any attention to the guy behind the curtain. And we'll handle all of those things for you. You just, bless your pointed little head. That's how a lot of elected officials in Wyoming look at this. Certainly how a lot of people on the Minerals Committee, Ogden Driscoll, and the Gillette City Council, apparently. Well, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue with the program. Back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. And definitely don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast. If you haven't listened to it yet, you need to go back. It is a deep dive into the voting record of gubernatorial candidate Eric Barlow, who claims to be a conservative. I'm going to tell you right now, my friends, he is definitely not. And he wouldn't know conservatism if it jumped up in front of him and slapped him on the noggin. I mean, there is no way you can't vote 81% with the Democrats for an entire decade and claim to be a conservative. Well, anyway, go listen to the podcast. It's really good. And it's getting a lot of response on social media right now. One more little plug for one of the sponsors of Cowboy State Politics, Morton Buildings. They're having an open house on September 3rd at 448 Big Goose Road in Sheridan. And they're having another open house September 17th at 5317 Highway 28 in Lander from 4 o'clock until 8. Now, let me repeat those one more time. So Morton Buildings is having an open house, and they want you to attend. September 3rd in Sheridan at 448 Big Goose Road. And then another one in Lander on September 17th at 5317 Highway 28 from 4 o'clock until 8. And make sure that if you go, and I really would go. They put on a pretty good shindig. But if you go, make sure you tell Mimi that I sent you. And I just do me a favor, go to the open house. You'll really like it. The Morton Buildings guys are great to hang out with. And when you do, tell Mimi, go find her and tell her that I sent them to you. I sent you to them. Just do me a favor on that one. So open houses for Morton Buildings. Now, before Troy McEwen talked about all the crime that elected officials are committing, and screwing over your constituents, I consider that a crime. And it's, man, what is being done to us about all this nuclear stuff is really, really kind of shocking. But let me tell you give you another example of some pretty outrageous crime that's happened. Now, The Blaze has a piece that's entitled, listen to this, 13-year-old with 18 felony arrests under his belt and a GPS monitor on his ankle, charged in violent Baltimore crime spree. So he's only 13 years old, and he's got 18 felonies under his belt, and he's wearing an ankle monitor. And I quote from the piece, a 13-year-old male who already had 18 felony arrests on his record recently was charged in connection with a spree of armed carjackings and robberies. Now, he's 13, and he's carjacking people and robbing them. Around 6:44 a.m. on July 26th, officers responded to an attempted carjacking, the station said. The victim reported that in the 2300 block of Guilford Street, two male juveniles exited their car and ran towards their vehicle. When the victim re-entered her car, the suspects entered it too and stuck her multiple times with an unknown black object, the station said. The victim managed to reverse her car, after which the suspects fled the scene. Bring in the troops. About 24 hours later, officers were called to the scene of another carjacking. Around 8:25 on July 27th, an armed robbery victim told police that around 5 a.m. earlier the day, there was another carjacking. The station said investigators on July 28th tracked the suspect's vehicle using its tag and located it, along with the stolen car, to the 500 block of Highland Avenue. Police identified one of the subjects as that 13-year-old male in question, since his ankle monitor placed him at the scene of the crime. Now, if you don't think that we have a crime problem, here is a perfect example, my friend. A kid that is supposed to be in school, that ought to be in school, is instead out and about carjacking people. We have a serious problem in our culture, my friends. And a lot of it can be traced back to the lack of having a stable family. I think that's absolutely a reason. But another one is that for 8 years, we really haven't prosecuted criminals. And they've just been allowed to run anywhere that they want, and we're not doing anything about it. So another good example of why we need good police officers. And I'm totally in favor of the police. I think most of them do a really good job. Now, of course, yeah, you've got a few bad apples, but by and large, police do a really good job keeping us safe and prosecuting criminals. I mean, and it just blows my mind that we would be in a time where criminals are just allowed to go rob people and commit assaults and deal drugs on the street, and we don't do anything about it. You want to know why our society's so screwed up? There's a perfect example. Something a little bit more lighthearted. John Kennedy, one of my favorite senators. The guy can't get anywhere near a microphone without saying something really funny. Well, now he says that he's relishing the cray-cray Mamdani success. And he says, we've gotten lucky. Quote, if I didn't know better, I would think that he was a Republican plant. While New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani's popularity continues to skyrocket, some Republican lawmakers are embracing it as a blessing in disguise. Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana said his party has gotten lucky with Mamdani's nomination, arguing that the cray-cray candidate is driving more voters away from the Democrat Party. That's bad for New York, but it's certainly good for Republicans. And let me just play you that video of him saying it. I love John Kennedy. The guy is funny, but here you go. Here he is.
We've gotten lucky. Bad for America, good for Republicans with Mr. Mamdani in New York. If I didn't know better, I would think he was a Republican plant. If I didn't know better, I'd think that Republicans had created Mr. Mamdani in a petri dish in a genomics lab. He's clearly from what I call the Gary Busey wing, the cray-cray wing of the Democratic Party. That's bad for New York, but it's certainly good for Republicans.
Oh, the Gary Busey wing of the Democrat Party. John Kennedy is a national treasure. I mean, if there were ever a guy that we needed to figure out a way for him just to continue commenting on politics in perpetuity, we need to do it. He's hilarious. Now, critics of Mamdani, including Republicans and even his fellow Democrats, point to his leftist and socialist policies. Because of his extremism, high-profile New York Democrats like House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries and Senate Minority Leader Chuck U. Schumer have refrained from endorsing Mamdani entirely. Kennedy said that although Mamdani's policies have alienated some voters, his candidacy has ultimately benefited Republicans. He's clearly, and I just love this one, I got to repeat it. He's clearly from what I call the Gary Busey wing, the cray-cray wing of the Democrat Party. That's bad for New York, but it's certainly good for Republicans. Absolutely crazy, my friends. Oh, I mean, again, we've got to be able to, make it so John Kennedy can comment on politics all the time, even when he's not in office. Now, speaking of Mamdani, and, he has said some things that are straight up socialistic, communistic, and there's no other way that you can see them. I mean, he says that we should seize the means of production. And again, I don't know that I've ever heard an actual politician who is probably going to be elected the next mayor of New York say things like that. I mean, it's truly incredible. And Elizabeth Warren, she came out, she did an appearance with him and said, well, if you want to know what the platform of the Democrat Party is, it's Zoran Mamdani. That's incredible. It just, I don't really know what to say except that it is the Democrats have really gone off the deep end if they think that Mamdani is representative of most Democrats. And, let me just play you a couple sound bites from him, and then we're going to go into this piece. The piece I want to bring to you is, what's the Democrats' end game? They're clearly not dealing in reality or living in reality. So what exactly is their end game? They've done a lot of really weird stuff. LGBTQ, ZXP, WS, men can become women and women can become giraffes. And none of it makes any sense whatsoever. So there's got to be an end game there somewhere. So let me just play you Mom Donnie, and just so we can set the mood. Here he is. We need to seize the means of production.
But then there are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it is the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment. And what I want to say is that it is critical that the way that we organize, that we set up our...
Well, here's another one. He says we have to be unapologetic about our socialism. Here you go.
What the purpose is about this entire project. It's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
We have to be unapologetic about our socialism. Now, I don't know who poll tested this guy. I mean, obviously they did a good job in New York because, I mean, every poll that I've seen says that that Mom Donnie is going to end up being the mayor of New York. But I don't think that plays in the rest of the country. It certainly doesn't play in Wyoming. I mean, if a candidate came out and said if a Gary Busey candidate came out and said those sorts of things in Wyoming, I mean, he'd probably be hogtied and drug out of town and escorted to the state line, never to be heard from again. But in places like New York, I mean, obviously that works. So, I mean, it leads you to ask the question: what exactly is the Democrat Party's end game here? Because I mean, you can't do all of this really nutso cray stuff, to quote John Kennedy, and not have an ultimate plan. Well, Kurt Schlichter wrote a piece in Town Hall, and again, this is just an opinion piece, but let me just read a little bit of the opening paragraph to you. Quote, Americans are more divided than we have been since the first time the Democrats started and lost the Civil War, with every norm being tossed out and every legitimate exercise of lawfully attained power by us normals being shamelessly obstructed. The left rejects the idea that patriotic Americans have any moral right to participate in their own governance, to pursue their own interests, or to assert their own rights. To them, we are nothing more than thralls, tax-generating slaves who must feed them, fuel them, fight for them, and obey their commands while meekly accepting their calumny. I always have a hard time saying that word. They're delusional. Things aren't going to work out that way. I mean, there's no possible way that it can, except, of course, if you're in New York City. And even then, we all know that polls are notoriously inaccurate. So, you know, maybe there's something, maybe that's at play in New York City. Every national poll said that Hillary Clinton was going to trounce Donald Trump, and we obviously that didn't happen. So, I mean, polls can be wrong. So, you know, we can always cross our fingers for New York. But things are not going to work out, but things are going to work out some way. And you have to wonder what their end game is. After all, the Democrat Party, which is entirely indistinguishable from the radical left, refuses to accept the legitimacy of Donald Trump or any of us, and is doing everything they can to prevent us from exercising that self-governance. That specifically and notably includes enforcing laws that were passed through the proverbial schoolhouse rock "I'm just a bill" process. It's not much of a democracy if democratically enacted laws are not enforced. I just finished talking about all the crime that's not being prosecuted. Well, it is in Washington, D.C. now, but in major Democrat cities across the country, crimes are just not being prosecuted at all. All you got to do is look at the crime statistics from Chicago on any given weekend. There's a number of people shot. You know, there's almost always a couple of people murdered. And the question is, why are those things allowed to continue? Well, it's because you're not prosecuting crime. You know, we have illegal immigration that the Democrats don't want to enforce at all. And I mean, that's a felony level crime. It gets you deported out of the country. And the Democrats will not admit that illegal immigration is a crime or is even a problem. Most of them lean on this stupid phrase of undocumented migrant. You're not an undocumented migrant. You're an illegal alien. I mean, that's what the law is. That's what it says. And that's how you should be treated. Now, we have very clear laws on racial discrimination, yet they're doing everything they can, formally and informally, to prevent us from enforcing them, particularly when they might benefit people of color. We have very clear laws on crime, yet they're doing everything they can, formally and informally, to prevent us from forcing them to make our cities safe, like in Washington, D.C. It's taking the National Guard to clamp down on crime there. They're perfectly happy to sacrifice hundreds of black lives and a few white ones to make sure Trump doesn't score a victory by making our urban cesspool habitable again. Why anybody would want to live in urban America, I have no idea. I don't know what it would take to get me to. I don't even think you could get me to move to, New York City, or even though the lovely Christine loves that town. She likes to visit there, but I don't know what it would take more than an act of Congress to get me to go there. But Schlichter, he's got a good point, right? So the Democrats are pretty much off their rocker. And let me give you a great example here. Joy Reid. All right. I know you hate it when I torture you with these people, but I do this for a reason, so that you understand the depth of the insanity of the radical left in this country. Now, Joy Reid isn't on PMSNBC anymore. Thank God. I mean, I don't really watch PMSNBC unless I'm on one of my let's find out what the other side think binges. But I do that occasionally. But so she started her own podcast. She's still, unfortunately, a leading voice in the Democrat Party and on the left. But just listen to the amount of insanity that's coming out of her mouth. Here you go. Check this out.
They can't fix the history they did. Their ancestors made this country into a slave hell. But they can clean it up now because they got the Smithsonian. They can get rid of all the slavery stuff. They got PragerU. They can lie about the history to the children. They can't originally invent anything more than they ever were able to invent good music. We black folk gave y'all country music, hip hop, R&B, jazz, rock and roll. They couldn't even invent that, but they have to call a white man the king, because they couldn't make rock and roll. So they have to stamp the king on a man whose main song was stolen from an overweight black woman.
That is a leading voice in the Democrat Party, Joy Reid. Now, to the rest of us, we all know that most of that's bullcrap. And I mean, from the very beginning, most of us don't look at the world in terms of black and white. But, influential people in the Democrat Party do, and they assume that constitutes the rest of the American consciousness, that most people look at it that way, and that message is going to resonate with most American voters. And it doesn't. That's why Donald Trump was elected overwhelmingly. Now, if you take that back to Wyoming, now we don't very often see that sort of craziness in Wyoming, but even Wyoming voters have rejected the ideas of liberalism. That's why in the last few elections, actual conservatives have been elected in huge numbers, because Wyoming citizens are tired of liberalism. And all it took was shining a light on what the radical Democrats and redcoats, radical leftists, I mean, they're all on the left, are doing. All we had to do was shine a light on them, and boom, Wyoming citizens went out to vote. And to extrapolate that to the rest of the country, I mean, I've told you over and over that I think that by and large, the American electorate is right of center. And I mean, admittedly, I'm one of the more crazy conservatives in the bunch, but overwhelmingly, I think the American electorate is just center right, and it always has been. And so, for the Democrat Party to think that their radical ideas, like the ones that you just heard from Joyless Reid, that they're going to accept that, is insanity. I mean, it's buffoonery, and yet they keep doing it. So the question is, the critical question is, what is it that the Dems think is going to happen? As noted, this is not going to remain the status quo forever. It's unsustainable. But do they believe that if they hold their breath long enough until their faces turn as blue as the Democrat enclaves in Teton County, I put that part in there, will we just give up and then they'll win? I mean, that has to be one of the possible outcomes that they're thinking of, that eventually we'll all just say uncle and we're done with it. Will we just give up and shrug our shoulders and decide to allow them to do whatever they want to us? Okay, here you go. Here's our hard-earned money, and give it to your deadbeat constituents and launder it to the communist NGOs and your billionaire donors. Here you are. Here's all of our guns. Do they really think that we're going to do that? No. Americans are not going to give up their guns, and the only thing that's protecting us from your extraordinarily radical views is the fact that we do own guns. That's not going to happen. And I mean, this op-ed piece is pretty long, but he does have a point. What is the end goal of the Democrat Party? But and here's why. Because their loss isn't guaranteed. American politics works on a pendulum. We've talked about that a lot on the program. It's possible that they could win the next election. And as we've seen, starting with Trump in 2016, anyone on a major ticket can win the presidency if they're a solid enough candidate. And if they do, they're going to do everything they possibly can to make sure that they don't lose power again. We've seen that the rules don't matter to the Democrats. We've seen that norms don't matter to them. And we've seen that the Constitution doesn't matter. They, like the rest of the Western world's ruling class, will abandon the mechanics of democracy or our republic, even as they claim to be protecting it, in order to solidify their grip on power. And that, my friends, is very, very dangerous. And so it is critically important that we uncover what the end goal, what the end game of the Democrat Party actually is. So think about it. It is to gain and maintain power for as long as they possibly can. And that's why they resist on prosecuting illegal immigrants into this country, because what they think is at some point Republicans will relent and grant amnesty, and those 20 some odd million illegal aliens in this country will automatically become Democrat voters, and then the Democrats will have a permanent majority in this country. So maybe that's one of them. But the real question is, how does America get out of this? I mean, how is it that we stop what it is that they're doing? I mean, we know that their goal is permanent power, so that they can do whatever they want with us. I don't think that that's actually going to happen. But the answer, my friends, is we have a right to pursue our interests through the use of lawfully won political power. We didn't waive our right to do so just because we elected generations of Republicans that refused to do so. Nope. This is the time for reflection by the Democrats. They need to figure out what they're going to do, and if they keep going to the left, even as they demonize the other half of America, it's going to end badly for everyone. But even worse for them. That's not a threat. That's reality. And so I think, my friends, that the end goal of the Democrat Party is to and this is going to seem very abstract, but I really think that this is part of their end game. That their goal is to convince you that the realities that you hold true today, that men are men, that women are women, and that the two put together make babies, that those things aren't true. And if they can convince you of that, they can convince you of anything. And the end goal, and here's the other piece of evidence, and he doesn't mention this in the opinion piece, but I think one of the other pieces of evidence is that you have a number of these groups, the LGBTQZXPWDS crowd, the Marxists, the Islamists, and the other radical Democrats, which might fit into any one of those other groups, that all of them pretty much are aligned on the same plane, and that is to create a permanent Democrat majority. Now, they all have different end goals. I mean, the Marxists have a different end goal than the Islamists do. The Islamists want everybody to be Muslim, except, of course, if you're an infidel, in which case they want you to be dead. The LGBTQZXPWDS crowd wants you to capitulate to their own hedonism. That's what they want, for you to agree that they can do whatever they want, and that leads them to indoctrinate your children because, I mean, there was that rally. It was in like 1995. I think it was 95 or 85. I don't remember, but there was a rally on the National Mall, and it was a gay pride rally. And one of the chants that was recorded, and I'm still looking for this recording, but one of the chants on the National Mall was recruit, recruit, recruit. 1 in 10 is not enough. And what they mean is at the time, there was a statistic that they claimed that 1 in 10 Americans was gay. But I mean, that is one of that group's goals. But that's different than the Marxists. The Marxists, they want straight up socialism. I mean, of course, they are not going to be participating in socialism. You are. They're going to be the folks that are sitting on top, benefiting from the fruits of all of your labors. So these different groups have different end games, but the avenue towards those end games is all the same, and that's why they're all allied together. And so I think that the real end game for the Democrat Party is to maintain a constant and permanent majority. Now, the question is, why do they think that doing all this, as John Kennedy said, cray-cray stuff, why do they think that that's going to work? Well, the truth is it's not. But when you are so far to the left and you are so encapsulated in your own little Washington, D.C. bubble, or your bubble that happens to be on a university campus, you think that your ideas will work. And it is, it's an echo chamber, and all of the people that are around you say, well, yeah, that's a great idea. Let's go ahead and do that. That'll work. And then you find out that in the real world, those things don't actually work. As Margaret Thatcher said, socialism only works until you run out of other people's money to spend. And so, I mean, yeah, when you are that far on the left, you really do think that most people are going to agree with you. And the truth is, most Americans don't really want anything to do with politics. I happen to be one of those crazy people that I love politics, but most people don't. They just want to go to work. They want to go buy their boat and go fishing on the weekend and live their life and not be encumbered by government. That's why we live here. That's why most people live in Wyoming. I mean, why else would you put up with 8 or 9 months of snow? Well, it's because you can be left alone here, that you can do whatever, prosecute your own life, and enjoy your own freedom here. That's why we live in Wyoming. And that's what most people like. Most people, the reason why they don't follow politics is they don't want to, they're too busy running their own darn lives. And the only time that they really start investigating who's running for office, and this is one of the reasons why Mom Donnie is probably going to be, there's a big possibility that he might be the mayor, is most people don't pay attention to politics until it's time to vote. And even then, they only pick up maybe a newspaper here or there, or turn on the news, and it's whomever sounds good, and they don't understand who these folks are. It's the same danger that Wyoming faces with Eric Barlow. Most people think that he's a heck of a nice guy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, well, Eric Barlow, he's a really nice guy. Well, that's great. Don't vote for your friends. Don't vote for your friends. Take your friends out to dinner. Do your research and vote for the person who's going to best represent your interests and protect your freedom. And I guarantee you that is not Eric Barlow. Similarly, it is not Zoran Mondani. It is not Elizabeth Warren. Those people are not in favor of your personal liberty. They're in favor of their own self-aggrandizement, what government can do for them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard somebody tell, well, Bo Biden told me that he just wants to, go to D.C. and get the permanent paycheck. Maybe so. I don't know if that's true, but it doesn't really. And if you compare that to the actions of a lot of these legislators, a lot of times it pretty much matches up. So, you can just extrapolate what they really think out of it. But the Democrat Party, yeah, their plan is to get and maintain power. And the only reason you're seeing all this cray-cray stuff is that they are in their own isolated bubble, their echo chamber, and none of the reason that exists in your world and in my world enters into it, because we don't hang out in Washington, D.C., and we don't hang out on university campuses. But there you go. My take on it. Well, let's see here. Our break schedule's a little bit off today, so let's go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we're going to get back into some Wyoming news. There's an op-ed from POS Tom Lubnow, and one from the Turkey Vulture. Yeah, you're going to love this one. So we'll do that next. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Back in a minute.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. Don't miss tomorrow's Open Line Friday. Every Friday, I open up the phone lines and we talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. You know, if you notice, like days like today, I've got such a busy schedule that I didn't even open up the phone lines. And it's not that I don't enjoy talking to you. In fact, that's one of the highlights of this program is getting to hear what you think and having you call in. I really enjoy it. And I think I've told you before that when I started this program, what I wanted was as close to as I could get to having a radio show. There was nobody in Buffalo. Buffalo doesn't even have a radio station anymore, but they were not going to hire me to do a radio show. My views are a little bit opposite of those that are on your typical radio station. Not AM talk radio, but, you know, on the station that was in Buffalo. So anyway, I created a podcast that was pretty darn close to, as close as I could make it, to a radio talk show. And I finally have the ability to take live calls. And I have to tell you, my friends, it is one of my great pleasures doing this program, talking to you, hearing what you think. I really get a charge out of it. So don't miss tomorrow. It's Open Line Friday. Go ahead and give me a call. Whatever you've been dying to talk about, we'll talk about it. And that's tomorrow from 8 to 10 every Friday that I'm around. I've got a trip coming up next week that I'm going to miss. Thursday and Friday, so there won't be an Open Line Friday next week. You know, I'm only a one-man show here. Well, when Agent 29's here, we're a two-man show, but can't be in two places at once, though I may try to figure out a way to do the program from wherever it is that I'm going. So I've got a trip next week, so the schedule is going to be a little bit different. Now, there's a piece in the Turkey Vulture Let's see here. It was actually published on the 18th of August, but I just saw it today. The turkey vulture, of course, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, one of the other leftist rags in this country, in this state. Cheyenne City Council delays decision on limiting vehicle noise, establishing a penalty structure for offenses. Apparently, there are a lot of people in Cheyenne that don't like loud vehicles. And I have to tell you, when it's 11 o'clock at night and the lovely Christine and I are lounging on the couch watching some ridiculous television show, I don't really like hearing one of those super loud diesel trucks go by. But there again, I'm kind of in favor of some loud vehicles. I've over the years I've come to realize that loud pipes save lives, but not in Cheyenne. And I quote, "The Cheyenne City Council members are considering creating a new ordinance covering vehicle mufflers and noise and establishing a graduated penalty structure for reoccurring events." The conversation, which took place on Monday at the council's Public Service Committee meeting, follows months of complaints from residents about loud motorcycles and car engines early in the morning or late at night. The ordinance would create Section 10.24.200 and repeal another one, which states, quote, "No person shall modify, repair, or replace the exhaust system of a motor vehicle or operate a motor vehicle in a manner which will amplify or increase the noise emitted to a level above that emitted by the original exhaust system of that vehicle. No muffler or exhaust system shall be equipped with a cutout, bypass, or similar device." Now, the truth is, my friends, some vehicles are just loud. But I have a bigger question. Why is it that when our neighbors are doing something that we don't like, we run to the police or we run to the city council? We don't walk across the street and have a conversation with our neighbor. I'll give you a classic example. When I used to live in an apartment building, my neighbor upstairs, man, he would watch Denzel Washington movies at peak volume at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I knew, he was watching Denzel Washington movies because his favorite one was Training Day. And the reason I knew that is I became able to repeat that movie word for word. So instead of calling the landlord, I walked out of my door, up the stairs, knocked on his door and said, "Hey, man, can we have a discussion about watching Denzel Washington movies late at night?" And he looked at me quizzically and said, "How do you know I watch Denzel Washington movies?" And I say, "Well, because I can hear them at peak volume while I'm trying to sleep." And so we talked about it and we came to an arrangement that 11 o'clock was quiet time. And I made the concession that though I got up pretty early in the morning to work on the podcast, I wouldn't do that before 5:45. I know it's a weird time, but that was the deal that we made. But I went and talked to my neighbor instead of going to the landlord or the police or whatever. Why have we lost the ability to just go be neighborly and say, "Hey, neighbor, this is going on and it really creates a problem for me. So could we come to some sort of arrangement?" It's because I don't know why we've lost that ability, but I think it has a lot to do with these things. That too often we're all consumed with our devices and we do things on the internet and we don't do things face to face. You ever notice that the younger generation, they don't want to pick up the phone and call you? No, they'll text you. And some of the people that are only slightly younger than me, instead of calling, they'll just text. And, yeah, it's convenient. I get it. But what it does is it decreases the amount of face time that you have with your fellow citizens, with your neighbors. The lovely Christine and I have been together about 2 years, and we haven't had a neighborhood barbecue. When I went and campaigned for my precinct position, there were a whole bunch of people that we never talked to. We have to get back to being neighborly with each other. This problem in Cheyenne could easily be reduced if you would just walk next door and say, "Hey, man, hot bike you've got. Can we maybe not rev it up at midnight in your driveway? Could we save that for like 8 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock in the morning?" You just got to go be neighborly to each other. And I think that we've lost the ability to do that because we're so entranced with our mobile devices and doing everything on the internet. And think about this, right? There are comments on some of my podcasts. This is why I did the show. Don't listen to the comments. That those folks wouldn't dare to say that to my face. We write things on the internet that we would never approach our neighbor or anybody else for that matter and say the same things to their face. But because we are detached, because we're so entranced with our mobile devices and the internet and Facebook and all of that, that I don't think that we really have the ability to talk to each other anymore in a calm and reasonable manner. The truth is, most people, if you walked across the street and said, hey, you're keeping me up at 2 o'clock in the morning and I really have to go to work early, and so could we cool it with the loud partying? Most people would be so shocked that you actually did that they'd probably go along with it, because as a culture, we have just stopped doing that. And we've got to get back to that, my friends. Get away from the mobile devices. Go talk to people. That's what I do on a daily basis, sitting behind the microphone, and I love it. This is my, if you ask me, this is what I was born to do. But not in Cheyenne. Nope. The city council is going to make sure that you can't have your custom vehicle, your custom motorcycle or truck or whatever it is. Let me just read you a little bit more of this. The city attorney, John Brody, said Cheyenne regulates noise in two ways. The first as a nuisance under Chapter 8.56, which covers the provisions that set the standard for decibel levels. If a vehicle exceeds those levels, it is considered a public nuisance. The second way is the city adopts some state statutes under Title 31 that have to do with excessive noise in regard to vehicles or mufflers. The city has adopted that statute only by reference, so that not only is excessive noise from vehicles a public nuisance, it is also a traffic-related offense. If adopted, the ordinance would eliminate that state statute adoption by reference and codify the language from the state statute directly. So, in other words, they're just codifying what's in state statute. But this is yet another example of why don't we enforce the laws that we have? We don't need to pass new laws. There's, every once in a while, you'll hear Agent 29 complain about the large set of green books that he gets, every other year. I don't know how often they're printed, but we have more laws than we could possibly ever need, and most of them aren't enforced. We don't need to pass new laws. You need to enforce the ones that you have. We already have decibel levels in neighborhoods. And so if you just enforce those, maybe you wouldn't have to deal with it. Let me give you another example. When I lived in Virginia, which again, I should have done a little bit more research on that place before I moved there, but that's another story. They had a law against tinted windows. And I found a hot deal on a car that I just couldn't turn down. We decided that we wanted it. It was one of those Mercury Cougars that are fun to drive. And so we bought it. Well, the windows on it, the car was from Tennessee. Tennessee doesn't have the tinted window law. And so we hadn't had that car a week, not even enough time to set up an appointment to get the tint on the windows changed. And we got pulled over because the windows were tinted black on it. And, I came to find out later, and it was, I told people the story, and they're like, oh, yeah, man. Like, if you have tinted windows, you're going to get pulled over almost immediately. Well, that's how you enforce the law, right? If you have a law that's on the books, enforce it, and the public will comply with it. They don't have any other choice. Either that or they continue to write tickets. So we've already got laws on decibel levels. The city of Cheyenne just needs to enforce the laws that they have, not create new ones. And again, I think that this problem could largely be solved if we just started talking to each other as people. That you just go next door and talk to your neighbor and say, dude, I'm having a problem with this. Don't fire up the ripping chainsaw at 6 o'clock in the morning. Please, can we wait until 8? I mean, that's all you got to do, and it solves a lot of the problems. But, until we start doing that, we're going to continue to have issues like this. And the other piece of advice, and I'm as guilty as the next person on this one, but put this thing away. And we don't have to be on our phones all the time. Just go talk to people. It works a little bit better. Speaking of folks that think that they're not being allowed to talk to one another, Frontier Republican founder Tom Lubnow, the irritating attorney in Gillette. And again, if you looked at yesterday on the program, I told you about that op-ed from he's a pal of the program, Rod Miller, but he wrote that absolutely dishonest article claiming that the legislature, or at least the Corporations Committee, had taken away irritating attorney Frontier Republican founder Tom Lubnow's freedom of speech. They didn't. They just took him off the agenda. He was allowed to testify for over a half hour. So, don't pay any attention to that. Do your own research. But the Frontier Republican has another, and maybe if you're new to the program, here's the whole deal with the Frontier Republicans. They are the disaffected Democrats that were in charge of the Wyoming Republican Party and who were relieved of their leadership roles when conservatives took over the Republican Party. They are the redcoats. They're the folks that have been hiding in the Republican Party for a really long time, and they're just mad. So they formed the a kind of defunct Frontier Republicans. They still have a website. These are the folks that they're always chanting civility and they're establishment liberal Republicans is what they are. Anyway, he's got this op-ed. Here's what it said. He wanted to talk about the free market. Let's see here. But there was a piece. Okay, so he talks about Adam Smith for a while. Of course, Adam Smith was a guy that came up with the invisible hand, laissez-faire economics that the government just ought to stay the heck out and let the free market operate on the laws of supply and demand. I absolutely believe in the free market. But it has to be free. When you pick winners and losers, when government gets involved, that's where you have problems with the free market. The Wyoming Business Council is a great example of that, giving grants to businesses where other private businesses don't get any help. This state has a long habit and frankly, a long track record of picking winners and losers and monkeying around with the free market. It's like they actually took George Bush at his word when he said, I had to break the free market to save the free market. Absolutely stupid. Let's see here. But about a third of the way into his piece, here's what he says, quote, recent political events indicate a trend in Wyoming away from a free market economy into a bureaucratic government economy where those in power pick winners and losers. Yeah, you helped continue it when you were Speaker of the House, Tom Lubnow. And again, anything that Tom Lubnow complains about, you need to immediately ask the question, what did you do about that when you were Speaker of the House? And the inevitable answer you will get out of most of those questions is, nothing. Of course, he won't admit that, but that's the truth. But every time you hear Tom Lubnow complain about something, you need to immediately ask yourself, what did Tom Lubnow do when he was Speaker of the House? And the answer to that question is nothing most of the time. But here's what he says. Wyoming looks like a political microcosm of the federal government. Perusing the pages of the Cowboy, several instances of folks running to be the government to stop projects is apparent. A gravel pit, originally leased on state lands, was killed by the State Board of Land Commissioners after angry residents concerned about the Casper Mountain viewshed protested the pit. Well, okay, so that is not exactly monkeying around with the free market and picking winners and losers. That gravel pit was on state land. State land is owned by you and me. Now, while it is true that you can lease state land, the people that live there convinced their elected officials and the state elected officials to deny the permit. I mean, that's how a representative democracy works, but that is not exactly the free market. Now, and we could make the argument that because that gravel pit was going to be on state land, then it was automatically picking winners and losers. It's, again, anything that Tom Lubnow says, you have to look at it with a healthy dose of skepticism. But he continues, solar farms in southeast Wyoming have attracted the scrutiny of legislators concerned about renewable energy projects spreading across the state. They would prefer renewable energy to create energy elsewhere to protect agricultural greenscapes. Okay, I mean, it's political drivel. But he says most recently, a combination of wind and solar projects in Goshen and Platte counties came under government scrutiny. Local leaders would prefer a coal or natural gas project power plant located in the area. Now, Lubnow is attempting to say that solar farms, wind projects, all these renewable energy things are examples of the free market. No, they are the exact opposite of the free market because a wind project only exists through government subsidies. Tom Lubnow. It is the perfect example of picking winners and losers. Windmills cannot be profitable without government subsidies because the technology right now, those windmills will never pay for themselves in the free market. So the only way that they're profitable is if the government is picking winners and losers. So to make the argument that because a community doesn't want a big wind project, that's somehow asking for government involvement, the government should have never been involved in the first place. And if they weren't, that wind project wouldn't exist because it wouldn't be profitable. If, Tom Lubnow, you actually believed in the free market, then you would already know that the free market wouldn't have prevented your wind project in the first place because you wouldn't have been able to survive. You would have gone bankrupt. And that's the point. That is the problem with government involvement in the economy, because you end up creating winners and losers in a way that disproportionately benefits one group over another, the very definition of picking winners and losers. But wind projects, solar projects, all of this renewable energy crap, it is only possible through government subsidies, the antithesis of the free market. And then he goes on. He says, although approved by the Natrona County Commissioners, a state legislator and others have logged their objections to a facility that plans to build micro-nuclear reactors in Casper. The reactors would be sold to the military, government, primarily to be used in locations around the world and not exclusively in Wyoming. Despite being supported by the coal industry, the Freedom Caucus has attacked Wyoming's carbon capture and sequestration mandates. Okay. All right. So first, carbon capture is a fantasy. The sequestration is a fantasy, though I will admit that using CO2 to rejuvenate oil wells, that actually works, only if the government is not involved. The problem with Tom Lubnow's argument is he's talking about government endeavors being challenged by the people that live there. Carbon capture is ridiculous. If he really believed in carbon capture, he would open up a tree business. Trees, and the numbers on this are fascinating. If you actually look at how much CO2 a grove of trees takes up in a given year, it's an immense amount. There's no need for any sort of carbon capture and sequestration. Now, the other part about this is that, and he admits that it's Wyoming's carbon capture and sequestration mandates. So the state of Wyoming set up an artificial plan to tax private companies. And that's what it was, so that the private companies had to spend extraordinary amounts of money on equipment to capture the whatever CO2 is coming out of their smokestacks and then sequester it underground. And then the governor's great idea is that he wanted direct air capture. So he sets up these pieces of equipment that are going to suck air in and put clean air out, and it's going to filter out the CO2 out of the atmosphere. I mean, that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but that's basically what it is. All of those are unfunded mandates by the government. And so it's the opposite of the free market. And so when you look at Tom Lubnow's piece, it is the exact opposite of what he's actually wanting you to believe. That his argument is undercut by the facts, my friends, that none of the things that he's talking about in this piece actually relate to the free market. In fact, opposition to these plans, that is, opposition to wind farms and solar plants and carbon capture and sequestration, is perhaps it is the exact opposite of what he's claiming. So opposition to that is in support of the free market. You see how confusing all of this gets? Well, this is how redcoats like Tom Lubnow convince you that they know what they're talking about. But when you actually pay attention to what they're saying, it's exactly the opposite. I mean, it is the best example. You ever watch that movie, The Flim Flam Man? It's let's see here. It's George C. Scott, and I can't remember the other guy in it. But if you watch that movie, and it was Representative Mark Jennings that first made me sit down and watch it. But you watch it, and the Flim Flam Man, if you know some of these legislators, former legislators like Tom Lubnow, you'll look at the Flim Flam Man in the movie, and then look at Tom Lubnow, and you'll be like, I didn't know you were a movie star, because it is exactly what they do. And this piece by Tom Lubnow is the perfect example of it. And it just tells you that the cow pie pays people like Tom Lubnow and Gail Simmons to write pieces for them, tells you exactly where they're at. The cow pie and the rest of the mainstream Wyoming media, they are at very best posing as conservatives. Every time that moron on his morning show gets on there, he attacks the Freedom Caucus relentlessly. And Chuck Gray does appear on his show pretty often. But let me ask you, when's the last time you actually saw someone from the Freedom Caucus on his show? I'll ask you a better question. When's the last time he actually invited somebody from the Freedom Caucus to be on his show? I don't watch it all that often, but I really haven't seen any indication that he's made any effort whatsoever to get the other side of the story. He is the classic example of the Jackson rhino, an endangered species that needs to actually be extinct. But he's the perfect example of it. Let's see here. We got about 10 minutes left in the program, and I've got, I always end up with a whole bunch. I already talked about Joy Reid. A whole bunch of stuff left in the stack of stuff. But here's one from Caroline Leavitt. And, I just love watching videos of her going after the press. And in this case, she's really good at it, just like her boss, the president, in going after the press and pointing out how ridiculous they are. Check out this video. She says, well, that's, let's see here. What was, only a reporter for the New York Times could ask a question like that. Take a watch, listen to this one.
If the point is to get everybody on the same page, why wouldn't Trump just take the call from Putin while the other leaders were in the room? He said it would be disrespectful to do that. But why is it disrespectful?
With all due respect, only a reporter from the New York Times would ask a question like that, Sean. The president met with all of these European leaders at the White House 48 hours after sitting down with President Putin on American soil. In fact, there was so much progress in the readout that was given to these European leaders immediately following his meeting with President Putin that every single one of them got on a plane 48 hours later and flew to the United States of America. And if I could just read for all of you some of the statements from those European leaders yesterday, you had President Zelensky himself saying it was a very good conversation. It was really good. We spoke about very sensitive points. The Secretary General, Mark Rutte, it was the president, only because of the president, that this deadlock was broken, but with President Putin by starting a dialogue. So these leaders, who this war is in their backyard, are very grateful that the president took that call and that he was there to provide them with a readout of Russia's thinking on this, something that was not done by the previous administration at all.
But that's what we have to continue to do with the mainstream press, is point out how absolutely ridiculous they are. Because they have been allowed to spew their liberal nonsense without opposition for so long that most of them have no idea what an actual conservative point of view looks like. Just like Jake from the Cowboy and the New York Times. I mean, they are different sides of the same coin. And all you have to do is point out their hypocrisy, point out the flaws in their reasoning, and how they have been wrong almost all the time. And it's, and the Cowboy, credit where credit is due, most of the time they don't make too many predictions. Their opinion section, with the exception of the irritating Frontier Republican founder attorney Tom Lubnow, and Gail Simmons, by the way. Well, actually, there's some other people on their opinion list that do the same thing. But their politics reporter, now that Trotsky Wolfson is no longer employed at the Cowboy, and I have to tell you that I was actually kind of sad to see Trotsky leave the Cowboy for one reason, that it took away a huge amount of the material that I have to do the program. All I'd have to do, really, if I was starving for material, is look for the latest Trotsky article, and boom, it's a ready-made show right there. But now he's gone, and so the folks that are filling in for him are slightly more interested in the facts, and they tend to report things a little bit more as they see them. But again, it's the opinion pages of all of these news outlets that are so incredibly egregious that you shouldn't pay any attention to any of them. And in fact, you should push back against them. And that's why this program has been so successful, is that I make an outright attempt to push back on the liberal mainstream media. And I mean, that is why. Oh, and by the way, I should tell you this. It's almost like Casey Kasem's top 40 countdown, but Cowboy State Politics is now the 31st. 31 on the list of the top 100 podcasts that you should be listening to in 2025 on FeedSpot. 31 out of 100. I guess I should say that I'm 31 out of 40 in the top 40 on FeedSpot's list. So it just shows you the popularity of this show and the quality of it. And I mean, there is no question, my friends, that Cowboy State Politics is the most listened to program in conservative program anyway in Wyoming. Definitely the podcast that set a lot of the records, that is still setting records in the Cowboy State. So anyway, my friends, we've burned up another busy broadcast hour on the program. Don't miss Open Line Friday tomorrow from 8 to 10. We're gonna hopefully talk about what you want to talk about. So make sure that you don't miss that program. And also, if you missed the podcast about Eric Barlow, well, you need what Eric Barlow says and what he does. You need to go back and listen to it. I mean, it is an incredible deep dive. And judging from the response that show has got, it's been pretty hard hitting, my friends. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching the program. For now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you tomorrow, my friends. Don't miss Open Line Friday. Have a good day.